Hi everyone, welcome back to my Alfred Hitchcock series. I've been on an extended break, partly because I was helping a friend of mine make his own independent movie in late June. But it's been quite a while since then, and I was not reviewing Hitchcock movies before then either. I think the last one I did was in May. The problem is that I sort of made it this rule for myself that I wasn't going to watch the next Hitchcock movie on my list until I'd made the video about the one that I'd already seen. And stuff just started getting in the way. You know, I kept having to postpone making videos because of things happening around the house here. I like to be able to do it when I'm completely alone, so I'm not disturbed and nothing interrupts the video, because as you know, I don't edit these things. But also I was a little discouraged because I kept doing research on the movies afterwards. Really nothing more than looking at the Wikipedia page and the IMDb page and stuff like that. And I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the people making the movie aside from Hitchcock, and I'm familiar with hardly any of them. Normally when I see a film I'm familiar with at the very least a few of the actors. I may not know the director or anything like that. I'd look over these long filmographies for some of these actors and these, the veteran actors who have been, who were working for decades, and I didn't recognize hardly any of the titles, and that was a little bit discouraging. And so I'd start to dread the process of actually making a video. Now I could have gone on and just watched all the Hitchcock movies, but it just, doing the series helps motivate me to watch the next one rather than putting it off. But I ended up putting it off anyway, so if you've been waiting around for me, I apologize for that. I'm going to try and start making multiple Hitchcock videos per week. Of course, I promised that before and didn't come through. But this movie, Lifeboat, the one that I'm talking about today, came out in 1944, and I originally saw it back in May. But I didn't, of course, get around to making the video. So here it is 2 months later, and I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to have to watch it again, just so that I'm, more familiar with it before I start talking about it. And that was actually a smart move, because this is a really good film. It's a kind of film that I really like quite a bit, where there's basically a core group of actors. Not necessarily any one of them is the main character, but they're all sort of participating in the story more or less equally. I really like ensemble movies with casts of like 6 or more people, and that's definitely the case here. The story of Lifeboat was apparently written by John Steinbeck. From what I've read, Hitchcock basically came up with an idea for a movie, and then he hired Steinbeck, who is the writer of East of Eden, of Mice and Men, and The Grapes of Wrath, and he said, I need you to come up with the story. And then he had another person do the actual screenplay. Interesting fact, this movie got a few Oscar nominations, one of which was for Best Story. Now, that isn't an Oscar category anymore. The original screenplay category started in the 1940s, but prior to that, going from the late 20s to the mid-50s was an Oscar for Best Story, and that's what this one was nominated for. It was also nominated for cinematography and for Best Director for Hitchcock, of course. So the story, as it is, takes place during World War II, and this was actually shot during the war itself. There's basically a transport ship, an Allied transport ship that gets hit by a U-boat, torpedoed by a U-boat, and sinks. And so a bunch of characters who survived the wreck managed to make their way onto a lifeboat. One lifeboat basically holding a whole bunch of characters, some of whom are American, some of whom are English, one of whom happens to be German, because the U-boat apparently, got destroyed as well. But he made it onto the boat, and so there's a lot of discussion amongst the characters who are not German as to whether or not this guy deserves to stay in the boat or not, since he's the enemy. And some people are like, well, you know what, we don't have to be at war here on this boat. We're all just trying to make it through. We're all trying to survive, trying to wait, basically, and conserve our resources, hopefully get picked up by a ship, because obviously none of us can swim the distance that it would require in order to get to land. We need to wait for a boat, and it would be better if everybody just got along. And some people, one of them in particular, an American by the name of Kovac, who worked on the Indian crew, is like, I do not trust this guy. He's going to try and mess with us. We are the enemy to him. And he sort of tries to take over the boat and give commands and everything like that. There was a bit of a hothead. The like I said, this is an ensemble movie, so there really isn't any one main character. But the one that we start off with is named Constance. She's a journalist, and she's played by an actress named Tallulah Bankhead. I really don't know a lot about this woman, except that she went on to be in the Batman TV series, playing a character named Black Widow. That's DC. There's actually another character, another actor, who ended up being on the Batman TV series in the 60s, playing a character called the Clock King. His name is Walter Slezak, and he plays Willie, who is the German who makes his way onto the ship. So Willie seems to only speak German, no English. And so, since Constance speaks German, she ends up translating what he says for the rest of the crew. Now, here's an interesting fact. When they screened this for German audiences, they wanted to keep what these two characters are saying between each other a mystery. So they shot additional takes in which Constance and Willie speak Dutch. They make the character, the Willie character, say he's basically Dutch. And so he doesn't speak any English, so that way the German audiences don't know what they're saying when they're speaking amongst each other. And then, of course, Constance translates from Dutch into English for the rest of the crew. Constance has a friend, a very wealthy businessman named Rittenhouse, who is played by a guy named Henry Watterson Hull. He was in the 1940s film adaptations of The Fountainhead and The Great Gatsby. There's also, like I said, Kovac. He's played by a guy named John Hodiak. I don't know really anything about what the other stuff is that he's done. I didn't recognize any of the titles. And there's a couple other. Hume Cronyn, who of course was also in one of Hitchcock's previous movies that I talked about, plays a radio operator by the name of Sparks. That's his nickname. He becomes friendly with a nurse who's made it onto the lifeboat. Her name is Alice. She's played by Mary Anderson, who is in Gone with the Wind. And there's also a guy named Smith, Gus Smith. He's played by an actor named William Bendix, who appeared in a film adaptation of The Glass Key by Dashiell Hammett. And if you're familiar with that, you might know that The Glass Key was sort of an inspiration for the Coen Brothers film Miller's Crossing, one of my favorite Coen Brothers movies. There's also a steward by the name of Joe. He's played by an actor named Canada Lee. Don't recognize him either. A lot of these people I don't recognize, unfortunately. Walter Slezak had a pretty big career after being in this. He was in the 1970s. He was in Black Beauty and Treasure Island, a couple adaptations there. So, like I said, there's a lot of conflict among the characters as to who should be giving the orders and what direction they should sail in, because apparently they don't have a working compass, and also whether or not they can trust the German guy. And that is basically the core of the drama. Also, of course, they have to deal with storms, they have to deal with the elements, they have to deal with their short supply of food. So yeah, it's a suspenseful movie. It's really interesting, and it has some great characters, and it's the kind of movie that really sort of naturally appeals to me because of the ensemble nature and the sort of dialogue heavy conflict right here. There's some action in the movie as well, but it's mostly just a war of words, in addition to just sort of waiting for rescue to come along. So this is a good one. I really liked it a lot. And I wanted to learn a little bit more about how it was made because, they spend pretty much the entire movie at sea. I know that can be a pretty difficult environment to work in. And, it was difficult enough for, the guys making things like The Abyss and Waterworld and Titanic. But, back in the 40s, they didn't have the technology. So it was like, are they just basically sitting in a boat and the crew is basically rocking it slightly and they have the rear projection of the sea in the background? And apparently, no, they didn't have any rear projection. It's a very common thing in movies of this era, is to have actors sitting in basically a car at a soundstage and then have a film playing behind them on a giant screen which shows the background going by as they're driving along. A very common technique for shooting that. But apparently they didn't do that. They did basically the same thing they did in Titanic. They had a water tank in the studio, big water tank, and they had various versions of the boat, some with one half, some with the other half, some with only the front end, some with only the back end, and they had crew people basically rocking the boat, and then they had, sprays of water dousing the actors for certain scenes scenes, and some of them got sick repeatedly because they were drenched in cold water for you know, multiple takes. Difficult film to make, I take it. It didn't do that well, unfortunately. It was a box office disappointment. It did well apparently in the cities, but not so much in the rest of the country. Apparently, it wasn't, you know, rah enough for most of the country. You know, it was you know, there's some ambiguity as to, you know, what should be done, rather than just making all the allies the good guys and the German the bad guy. It's a bit more ambiguous than that. And I'm sure some people had a problem with it, which is why it didn't do as well as some of the other films that Hitchcock has made. But it's well regarded now, I think, and I certainly did like it quite a bit. So that is my Hitchcock movie video for now. I'm going to make sure that this is up before the weekend, and so the next video that I post will hopefully be up on Monday. And if I can pick up the pace a little bit and do like at least 2 videos a week, I should be caught up. My goal was to finish the entire series by the end of the year. I don't know at this point if I'm going to be able to do that, because the year's already half over and I've only reviewed like 8 of these movies so far, and I was going to do 30. But here's hoping. So thank you very much for watching. Comment if you like, of course. And if you want to look in the description below, you'll see the link to the playlist where all these videos are located, and also the link to my CineRam Facebook page, where I post basically all the new videos. You'll see it's a more reliable place to find my new videos than the subscription page, because I'm a very small YouTuber. You know, the algorithm does not favor me. But thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Later.